Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm one of your co-hosts. We are down still without Patsy Feeman, who is almost done trekking across Spain, doing her, 5 million mile walk or something like that. I can't wait to hear the details of that. We'll hear stories from her when she gets back. But I am definitely joined by one of my favorite men in the world, Leb Tannenbaum. Leb, how are you, sir?
I am good. Thank you, Patrick. It's always good to be podcasting together.
Yeah.
And I'm actually better than good. I'm excited because you just did a pretty major talk at a conference with a group of CEOs, and I wasn't there. So I want to hear more about it. And I know our listeners want to hear more about it. So we're going to just run off of what you offered to the CEOs. What was the title of that talk?
But yeah, it was. So the title was, it's called Good Luck Executing Without These Three Things. A little bit of a teaser title to get people in the room and curious. And yes, I did. I presented at the 10th annual BRM Institute's global conference. It's called BRM Connect. Their first one 10 years ago was here in Portland, Oregon, and the 10th one, they thought, let's bring it back and celebrate again here in Portland. And the organization has grown. There were people there from all over the world. It was really fun, and I learned a lot. And for those who aren't familiar with BRM, it's business relationship management. Primarily at this point, it's kind of an IT role. And yes, I was there to present to the executives who attended the conference that good luck executing without these three things.
All right. So business relationship management, and let's kick it off with number one of these three things. And let's weave in the importance of purpose and understanding the why. Let's put it that way. So let's weave that in as well.
Yeah, you bet. Because you and I are both fans of Simon Sinek and his work. So the first, I presented it this way to the executives, right? There are these three primary things that you need in order to execute strategically. And the first, it's the first, and it's the biggest, it's the most important, and that is that strategic alignment at the top. We've talked about that here on this podcast before, but I feel like it always bears repeating, because even there in the room talking about strategic alignment at the top, every head was nodding. You could just see that, and just from the question that, yes, right. It is right. I should say, like, the good news is no one was disagreeing. Nah, we don't need that. But to help them understand what is strategic alignment, and it's, you can boil it down at its most basic. It's having your senior leadership team aligned around aligned, pulling in the same direction around your strategic priorities. And I do think you just led with the importance of purpose. People need to feel a connection to what it is, right? These can't just be, I don't know, things that I really couldn't care less about the things that we're working on. There needs to be a connection, and usually that it is that why. Why do we need to do this? Why is this important? Why can't we continue to do what we're doing? I mean, Leb, as you're currently working through Start With Why with a CEO, with one of your clients. How do you see purpose contributing to strategic alignment?
Well, I think ideally it answers the question, what are we aligning to? And if it's only, as Simon Sinek would say, if it's only the how and the what, it's probably not strong enough, and it's constantly changing. So if you go all the way back to Built to Last, back, 30 years ago, when they identified the need for core purpose, that's the thing that's enduring, right? That's what's going to last. And if the why is tied to something meaningful, maybe something that we have a belief about, something that maybe is so necessary to understand that it informs strategic alignment. It informs the what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Um, then we really have something to work with. But how many times have we walked into an organization and we ask them a question about their purpose or what's the why, what caused what caused the innovation, what caused this business to begin to um, just to begin. A lot of people either state something kind of in a static kind of mode, like a statement that maybe they've lost touch with.
Mhm.
Some pause and say, "Hmm, I'm not sure." uh, yeah, maybe the business has gone through an acquisition or something, and the why is unclear.
Mhm.
All of those kinds of things interfere with strategic alignment. Would you agree?
I would. That was as you were talking about that. I think another mistake. And I get it. It's a mistake. Like the intent is good, but the outcome is it lacks that why. It lacks the connection to the purpose. When when leaders want to create a really compelling why, they go out and they Google looking for examples, right? They'll Google other companies' purpose statements or whys, and you read something that is compelling and you think, oh, that's really good, and then you try to take someone else's and shape it into your own. Sometimes that works, but often it's somebody else's. So um, I think it really um, yeah being able to answer the question why are we here, and it's not to make more money. I'd even say it's not to help people. I mean it is, but how, right? It's like, I don't know, like maybe because again you're working through the book. How do you often hear that? Do you hear that our purpose is to help people? I feel like everybody's in business to help people. Or if you're not helping people, you're not making money. But how do you go from we're here to help people? How do you turn that into a compelling purpose, whether it's statement or a compelling? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think so. Some of the examples, one of the examples that in Start With Why um, is around Apple, and they wanted to disrupt and put powerful tools in the hands of everyday people so that they can do their thing,
Mhm.
whatever that was.
Right.
And that attracted um, a level of alignment to that belief that brought a lot of talent into the company initially, and it kept growing and bringing more talent in. And the early adopters were people who went, yeah, something about that. I'm aligned with that, and
Right.
I'm aligned with that. Why? And so strategic alignment, and in that example, the way Cynic writes about it is tangible. You can understand it, and you talk about like Southwest Airlines. They saw this lower cost, make it relatively easy, and have as much fun as possible, as much fun as you're allowed to have while you're flying. And it was, again, a clear purpose for taking the chance, with, I think United was already big, and, some other airlines were already big. And look what happened. And
Right.
look at the kinds of people who, if you've ever flown Southwest, especially, when I did back in the day, take 10, 15 years ago, I mean, they had comedians for flight attendants. I mean, they were great, and it was fun. So I think, answering the question of, well, what are we strategically aligned about,
Mhm.
and why does that matter, and what does that matter to us, and what does that matter to the people we serve?
Yeah.
Is really important. Um, I think we
Yeah.
said this in, one of the previous episodes. Remember your first car. Remember driving a car. Uh,
Hmm.
in the early days of your driving experience, that was out of alignment. It's just harder to turn,
Yeah.
right?
So yeah. So bringing that back to the presentation at the conference, at the BRM conference, in addition to there being executives there, there were an awful lot of business relationship managers, so the people
Mhm.
on the ground doing the work. And as we would talk about strategic alignment, what we in some cases we weren't, there were so many breakout sessions or lunch or it was a 3-day conference, so plenty of time to engage in conversation. We wouldn't even necessarily be talking specifically about strategic alignment and the importance of having the leadership team all on the same page about where we're going and why. But the business relationship managers would be talking about how priorities would shift from day to day or from week to week, or
Mhm.
they would get they'd get a number of different projects thrown at them from multiple parts of the organization, and they would then need to bring these to the senior leadership team and say, these are all viable projects. What should we work on first? How do we prioritize these?
Mhm.
And to hear some of the stories where the leadership team couldn't agree or didn't agree, and that's and you could just hear it in their voices. You could see it on their faces. And as one would share that story of that example, so many others around the table would be nodding their heads and going, "It's so frustrating. Yes, that's exactly what we have." And the point in that presentation to the executives was, good luck executing when your leadership team isn't aligned. The organization doesn't know what they're supposed to be working on. They don't know from day to day, from week to week. I mean, and not only that, but then we talked about this in the room. We've talked here about leadership teams having each other's backs. That's a big part of alignment, right? That Leb,
Mhm.
you have spoken on this podcast about how alignment doesn't mean agreement, that they're different, right?
Right.
That we don't have to agree. But in fact, it's great when we don't agree, as long as the doors are still closed and we're together and we're negotiating, we're throwing out different ideas. We are actively disagreeing in a healthy way. We're inviting conflict,
Mhm.
ultimately to arrive at the destination that, hey, this is not my first choice, but I hear that I can align with my colleagues in this senior leadership team that this is the direction we're going, and I will support it. And when the door opens, I'm not going to tell anybody else it wasn't my idea, it wasn't my plan. I'm not going to wait for it to start falling apart and then say, well,
Right.
hey, they should have done it my way. Right? No, I'm in. I'm in, and I'm aligned. Even though, actually, I wouldn't say I'm aligned even though I had a chance to disagree. I'd say I'm aligned because I had a chance to disagree, because I was given
Mhm.
that opportunity,
That's
and
good.
you heard my
That's
argument,
good. Mhm.
and we ultimately decided, yep, this is where we're going. And the importance of that to the organization, presenting that collective face, that collective front. Um, I challenged those leaders. I said, when mom and dad are fighting, the kids choose sides. And so a fracture at the top becomes a fissure at the bottom of the org chart. And that fissure usually is a silo, right? You get silos that form. I'm aligned with my leader, you're aligned with your leader, and that inhibits our ability to collaborate and communicate and share information across functional lines. Or as the BRMs were expressing frustration, even understanding we may both have very different ideas about what we're supposed to be prioritized.
Right. That's really good. Yeah, and when you think of strategy, if you're only thinking of what are we gonna do and how are we gonna do it, um, you really fall short. Um, the why should help inform what we're gonna do,
Mhm.
right? And then how we're gonna do it.
Yes. Yeah.
So often what we run into is when we're working with leadership teams and executives is that there's really a look for tactical alignment.
Mhm.
Are we agreeing that we're going to do this? But if you're not vetting it against what are we here for? Why do we exist? What's our purpose? Um, Maybe we wind up in some place that we that doesn't align with our purpose at all. And so it really isn't strategic,
Yeah.
but we want to call it strategic alignment.
I think you nailed it. I feel like like that point there, you just nailed why it's important to have your why, to know your purpose, and how that helps with strategic alignment. That a minute ago I was talking about, you want to close the door, you want to engage in all of that conflict, you want all sides to be heard, and then your purpose. It sounds like your purpose breaks the tie, right? That
Mhm.
okay, you think one thing, I think something else. What does our purpose say about what the strategic initiatives should be, what the strategic priorities should be? Our purpose should guide us in the process of answering those questions.
Yeah, no, that's great. And again, if you go back to built to last, the other piece that was in the enduring part of the business were your values.
Right.
So sometimes, I mean, obviously, people identified and wrote out their core values um, to support, who they believed they are, right? To support the purpose, to support the belief, to support the mission at the highest level or the deepest level. And um, again, oftentimes, especially when we get hooked by the tactics, um, we don't refer back to our core values and say, well, what are our core values telling us? Because our core values
Right.
support our purpose. And the other thing that I love that Simon Sinek addressed and wrote about in Start With Why is values that are actionable. They're not a noun. And so you have language tied to something that's actionable or something that people understand, oh, this is how we behave when things are on the line. I can turn to this value and I understand how to make a decision. I understand how to behave. I understand how to treat the customer. I understand how to treat a colleague, um, even when we disagree or even when someone's disappointed or upset,
Yeah.
right? So that enduring center of gravity, if it's not there, it's really hard to stay aligned, like really strategically aligned.
Yeah. That's good.
So what was the second point? And,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Okay. Yeah. So that first point was for good luck executing without leadership strategic alignment. The second one is good luck executing without leadership development, without confident and competent leaders in the organization who can cascade your vision and your strategic priorities down into the organization. Right? When you have that, then you have people who can translate your strategic priorities into the actionable steps that
Mhm.
are needed to execute it. When you have that, you have people who understand the importance of leading themselves first before they before they go out and try to lead and inspire their people to follow suit. When you have strong leadership at that next level, you have people who are able to manage and fix any of the chronic performance and behavior issues that are going on in the organization.
Yeah.
I mean, there's so many things that good leadership brings to an organization. I shared this fact in the presentation, specifically in this section on the importance of leadership development in executing. There was a 2019 training industry survey that showed that every dollar invested in leadership development returns 415% to the bottom line, which was, yeah, I mean, I even said this in the room. I said, okay, you can scoff at that number, right? Okay, yeah, well, every dollar is going to return $4.15. Prove it. But when you think about the lost productivity from people not knowing what am I supposed to be working on, or when you think about the cost of turnover, how much turnover happens because of crappy leadership? A lot. There were a lot of people in the room at this conference who talked about they changed jobs or they're considering changing jobs because they're frustrated by the lack of leadership or the lack of direction in the organization. Um, and so you start to add up. We had Jim Taylor on, Lev, I'm trying to remember where you weren't able to join us for that episode, but Jim Taylor was talking about the high turnover in the restaurant industry, specifically because of untenable workloads and crappy culture. And so when you think about, you start to add up all the ways poor leadership manifests itself in the business and hurts the business. It makes sense that every dollar you invest in leadership development can return up to 415% to the bottom line.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. I mean, a few things came up for me hearing you speak about that. One is we all have a desire somewhere within us to continue to learn and grow.
Mhm.
And how many companies have suffered retention issues because they haven't been investing in people,
Right.
leadership development included. So I think that's maybe part of the 415% return because it costs money to replace people who leave, maybe because they feel, I've been given a leadership role and I'm not learning and growing. There's no investment in me. So I think that's part of it. I think it's also important to look at your purpose when you decide. So what are we developing? What does it mean to develop leadership here? We've all walked into companies where it's all competency based, and or 360 feedback based. And where we have a tendency to go with that is shore up or strengthen a weakness. And then we call that leadership development.
Right.
One of my all-time favorites around leadership development is John C. Maxwell. He talks a lot about servant leadership, and he does it. He has I think it's a YouTube video that's really great. It's like 2-3 minutes where he talks about, no, don't shore up your weaknesses, strengthen your strengths.
Mm.
And that kind of that has changed over the years. But I remember when I began consulting, it really was more about strengthening a weakness. And he talks about, it's funny, he'll say, okay, you got 4 A's and you got a C. And what do your parents say to you? What's it going to take to get that C to an A?
Right.
And he goes, forget about it. You suck at math. You're always going to suck at math. Don't become don't become an accountant.
That's right.
Build on your strengths. And it's just so funny, but he's very good at being direct and lighthearted at the same time. But what are we talking about? What is our purpose? How do our values inform us about what type of leadership development are we talking about?
Hmm. I love that. And it reminds me of there's an exercise that I do with the executives, or with honestly with anybody I coach, because you're exactly right. I think everybody in leadership has either had a 360 or been told they should get a 360, and those are they can. I've done 360s with leaders and executives. I've done 360s, and they return useful information. But to your point, where do our eyes go? Even when we might even ask, what does this leader do well? What does this leader not do well? Or, the old stop, start, continue question.
Mhm.
And continue should reinforce what you're doing well. But my eyes always go to what the leader should stop doing and start doing,
Right.
as I want to focus on the failure. So one of the exercises that I do with, and it's one of my favorite exercises, Leb. It literally brings me, like, forget about professional joy. This brings me personal joy and
Mhm.
satisfaction because it's life changing. And that is an exercise to discover your own greatness. What do you bring to the table?
Mhm.
And it's not rocket science, but what I've learned through the years, it's exactly what John Maxwell's talking about. What you were saying, he's talking about is, let's figure out what you do really, really well. Let's lean into that because very often, what you're doing really, really well, or what you're doing exceptionally well, you're often doing it unintentionally, right? You just, hey, I just show up, I do me. I'm just here to help. I'm here to, I'm just doing my job. But look at the impact that you're having on all the people around you. Like,
Mhm.
look at the positive impact you're having. So now, when you discover what it is that you've been doing unintentionally, and now you can start doing it intentionally,
Mhm.
like not with arrogance, but with a humble confidence that this is actually what I do really. These are my strengths. This is my greatness, and everybody has it. And when you bring that into every situation with that humble confidence, and yeah, I for sure I have those weaknesses. But the way I see it now, Leb, is where I suck at things. I mean, there's giant lists of things I suck at. We could fill 3 episodes, me going through all the things I suck at. But I prefer to focus on what am I great at, and then what I suck at. I'm going to step back and let you step in because you're great at those things. Or when Patsy's here, let Patsy step in, and or, whoever it is on the team, and not be intimidated by that, not feel inadequate because of that, but to celebrate, hey, there's an opportunity for you to shine, for you to be like, we can all be
Mhm.
great together.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that approach more than focusing on what I suck at. That just, I don't know, that beats me up.
Yeah. I think that's great. And, the other thing that comes to mind for me is, um, so often we think of leadership development in a hierarchical mindset, but leaders are needed at every level. And it's often a leader uh, at the lower levels of an organization that rallies the energy and the enthusiasm and understands and believes in the purpose um, that we may not invest in. So, just to clarify, when we're talking about leadership development, we're not talking about only those at the top,
Correct.
right? There are
Great
leaders
distinction.
in every level of an organization that need to be empowered, invested in, and grow. And they may move up and move up and move up, but wherever they are, leadership is needed.
That's it. That's it. Well, and it that flows into the third thing that you need, in
Yes,
order to execute.
I'm on the edge of my seat.
I know. I knew you would be. But so that first is strategic alignment. Good luck executing if your leadership team's not on the same page. And then that strong next level leadership development, right? Developing the leaders all throughout the organization. And it's funny, I said to the CEOs, because good luck executing without that. When you don't have that, all of that work it rolls up to you as the CEO. So if you find yourself playing in the weeds, it's often a sign that you're not investing enough in strong leaders and leadership development, and then trusting them to do what you've put them there to do. And that last thing that you need in order to execute strategically is you need a high performance culture. You need engaged people who understand how they fit into the big picture and are committed to executing the strategic priorities. So often your strategic priorities are over and above the day-to-day work, right? That you need to do the day-to-day work to keep the lights on and deliver the customer requirements. But strategic priorities are often focused a year, 3 years, 5 years out. So it's additive. It's over and above my normal job. and unhappy people, disengaged people don't go above and beyond very often.
Mhm.
So without this high performing team that you can harness, execution really grinds to a halt. And it's how that leadership development piece factors into that. You need that next level of leader who can motivate and inspire and engage people and care for them and love them and empower them. I mean, it's more than just giving them objectives and directing their work. It's showing empathy. It's meeting them where they are. It's developing them. So not leadership development, it's employee development. Are they growing? Are they feeling cared for, and do they feel like they're growing and evolving?
Yeah.
Um,
Mhm.
so that's that. You put those three pieces together. So, Lev, this was interesting. Again, at the conference, whenever we'd start talking about culture, um, there were several people who would identify. They would volunteer because they were proud of being on their organization's culture team or culture committee.
Uh-huh. Mhm.
And I love that. And we've worked with organizations, we've worked with clients to create employee led or employee heavy culture teams. Um, but when you look at the three things that you need for strategic execution, a culture committee or a culture team can't do those first two, right? They can only do so much. They can do a lot, but typically what you'll see a culture team or a culture committee do is they'll do right. They'll find ways to bring employees together. They'll find ways to inject fun and joy and they might make good solid recommendations up to the next level leadership and maybe even the senior leadership team. But that's the extent of their authority. They can't force a senior leadership team to align. They can't, they don't have the budget to develop their leaders. So as we talked about that at the conference with different people on the committee, they would all say, yeah, there's only so much we can do. And boy, we wish,
Mhm.
we just
Mhm.
wish that
Mhm.
they would fix this or they would do that. And all of those things fell under leadership development and strategic alignment at the top. So it's really a challenge to the listener. Great, create a culture committee, but you can't abdicate the responsibility that you have in those first two buckets.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, we've been around a lot of versions of culture committees, who make a difference and sometimes recognize they're frustrated by that they see more, they wanna do more, they know they can do more.
Yeah.
Um, one of the things about high performance culture or high performance team is it indicates that there are metrics that let you know whether you're performing or not. And
Mm.
it reminds me of a time when I was the coach of my daughter's basketball team, and in fifth grade, and the parents came up with this notion that well we should play basketball but not keep score. And the kids wanted to know how they were performing. So there was
Right.
no official scoreboard, and there was always one or two kids maybe on the bench who were substitute kind of players who kept score.
Right.
And both teams knew what the score was, and it was inevitable in a lot of ways. Um, my point here is that if the metrics don't include some metrics about culture, about behavior, about the purpose, the why we exist, about our values, maybe we're falling short or we're headed in the direction of high performance that leads to some undesired results like
Mm.
burnout or turnover,
Right.
or Um, we're stuck in the market manipulation stuff because we've lost touch with why we exist in the first place. So we're putting out coupons, we're battling on price, we're talking about features, we're doing all these things that don't really put us in the position to measure, are we really high performing,
Mm.
and what metrics define that. And again, I think that's an area where we've all helped organizations come back maybe to something that they've left, or look at their metrics in a way that other companies don't, like leaders who take responsibility if their team is not performing well. And they look in the mirror first, and then they look out the window. And then they say,
Yes.
oh, yeah, well, that's why leadership development is important. I need to continue to develop as a leader because something's falling short. Not they're falling short. It's, I can see some things that I need to do to improve.
Yeah. Yeah. Some of the questions that I got, you're nailing it right on the head. Some of the questions that I got right there in the room was, well, how do we do that? How do we create a high performance team? And the first two answers that I gave, you've touched on. The first was data, right? You need data, gather data. And I did talk about, we've talked about here that the tool that we use is the Denison Organization Culture Survey. And I talked about that there in the room because most quote unquote culture surveys are really just engagement surveys. They're happiness surveys. They're really just focused on the people. And it gives it I think it can give leaders a false impression of what really impacts our culture.
Mhm.
There's a lot more to it, and the importance of understanding that is it gives you then a lot more ways that you can influence it. When you understand there are other things that are entirely within your control, right? My happiness is not in your control. You can't make me happy, but you can, as the leader, you can communicate clearly and effectively where we're going, right? Go back to the conversation we were having earlier about how frustrating it is to people when their own leadership team isn't on the same page about how we should prioritize our work. Well, that is within your control, leader, right? And that has a lot of impact on how it feels to work here, which is another way of saying the culture. So the first thing we talked about was measure more than just the people aspect of your culture, right? Expand your vision, gather real data. And then the second thing was they said, how do we create great culture? And I said, go back one point, invest in your leadership development because all those things you said, the burnout, the confusion, the leaders who don't care, who can't empathize, and then hold them accountable. Like once you've invested in me as a leader, hold me accountable for the culture of my team.
Mhm.
You have to factor that into my performance evaluation. You can't just look at the numbers because eventually the culture is going to impact the numbers. If I'm a leader, measure the culture of my team and hold me accountable for that. And if it's not where it needs to be, hopefully invest in my development, grow me, develop me to fix it, to improve it. But if ultimately you have enough data that says maybe this isn't my thing, then you owe it to the people you owe it to the people on my team to get me into a better position for me and put somebody over them who can create that high performing team.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah. The other thing that I'm thinking of while you're sharing that is the importance of listening.
Mm,
Um, I think a lot of messaging and speaking um, it can create some level of performance, but there's also and formal collection of data. I mean, I love using the Denison culture survey because they have a verifiable database of hundreds of thousands of employees who have answered the same questions, and you get normed into the database. Around 12 traits and, and beliefs and assumptions. It's great. But some of the data collection is leaders who listen. And when you're listening, you're actually showing people a lot, right? You're showing that you're listening. You're showing that you care. You're showing that you're taking the time to hear. You are collecting information that you might not hear. How many times, Patrick, have we gone into organizations where one of the hits on a high performance culture is my leader gets too busy and cancels one-on-ones with me on a regular basis?
Far too often.
Right? So how does that play into the desire to have a high performing team or a high performing culture? Things like that. And when you're in a one-on-one, I was working with someone last year at a really high level with people in multiple, reporting to him in multiple countries. And the style of the one-on-one was basically running through tasks, task completed, going through the task list.
Mm-hmm.
And then we talked about and shifted the context, really the method or the purpose. We talked about, well, what's the purpose of the one-on-one? And he started to focus on building relationship and listening to how people felt about certain things, and certainly the tasks, how they were doing, and their performance went up.
Mm.
That's not what they were talking about over and over and over again. That went up like noticeably. So all of that to be said, sometimes, the last thing I'd say about it is high performance teams and cultures, people want to win.
Mm-hmm.
They want to win in the right way, and they want to win for the right reasons. And they want to feel like they're a part of it.
Amen. I think most people want to win together.
Yeah.
Right. In your organization, they don't want to win at somebody else's expense.
Yeah. Yeah. Even within the organization, it's like, you don't want, marketing to be flaunting it over sales.
Right.
Right. They want to win together.
Right.
In a high performance culture.
Absolutely. In a high performance team. So, and
what did they do? Did they give you a standing ovation at the end? I mean, how?
Okay. So this is the truth. I actually did have some. It was very flattering. I also think he was full of crap. Someone came up at the end and he said, you didn't tell me you were brilliant. And I laughed. I said, I didn't know until just now. It was very nice. It was very flattering. But we just, we're passionate about this stuff. It's, and everything we've talked about. I mean, I ended that section saying, good luck executing without your people, because without them, all that work either rolls up to you, the senior leader, or your next level leaders in the organization, which typically means it stops because you all have day jobs too, and you just can't do it all yourselves. So the whole point of that was we Leb, you, I, Patsy, we want to see CEOs win, right? We want to see them execute their strategic priorities. We want to see them doing well in business. And so often to me, it's not a hard recipe. It's a matter of, in some ways, getting out of your own way. It's just a lot of the stories that I heard at the conference. And it wasn't all bad. There was a lot of people celebrating their organization and what's going on. And everybody was excited that their companies felt it was important for them to be at this conference. So that was, and there were a lot of great breakouts and presentations. But that was definitely one of a theme running through there is, boy, it'd be great if we could get more done, right? If we could actually check more boxes and cross more things off lists, but we seem to get in our own way. And all all of those ways fall under, we don't have engaged people, or people in the right seats, or they all fall into that high performance culture, or that leaders who can lead and guide and inspire and direct and manage, or it fell into that our own leadership team doesn't know where we're supposed to be going. So that's that was kind of the
That's
whole
good.
reason behind putting
Well,
that together.
I just realized I haven't been writing, so let's go to a few let's get practical.
Yeah, I've
When
been
you have
writing.
guests, I'm always writing away. I wasn't writing away.
Well, do you want to go first, or
Sure. I'll just go ad lib and you can fill it in because you've been writing.
yeah.
Um, listen for high performance,
Mm,
and place value on listening, if not equally, if not more than speaking.
it's good.
Develop leaders at every level, not just at the top. There's actually data that can inform you about the health of your culture, right? Strive for a healthy culture, and the performance comes along with it.
Yep.
And the one thing that I think we didn't talk about that is pretty visible and noticeable when you walk into a high performance culture or work with a high performance team is it's okay to have fun.
Mm,
And a lot of the fun is spontaneous and some of it is planned, but infuse some fun into the demand for high performance, and it becomes healthier and attractive, and people are more likely to thrive as opposed to get tired. Okay,
agreed. Hey,
I'm passing it to you.
for somebody who didn't write them down, you still managed to take a couple of mine. So well done. You were. If anybody thought Lev wasn't paying attention, you refuted that. So that's good. Okay, I'll add. Hey, that you said invest in leadership development. That stat I thought was really compelling, and that's every $1 invested in leadership development returns 415% to the bottom line. Like, remember that stat as you're either preparing your budget for next year or as you're thinking about cutting your training and development budget. I love the conversation about strengthen your strengths. Forget about shoring up your weaknesses. Really focus on what do you do well and how do you lean into that. Hold your leaders accountable for the culture of their teams. Equip them first so that they know how to create great culture, but then hold them accountable for their success, and where they're not cutting it, you owe it to the people to make a change. I like the point you made. Let your purpose, your why, break the ties when you're trying to find strategic alignment, right? Make whether it's throwing it up on the wall or just reminding people throughout, not just once but throughout. Let that be the guide to help you align as a leadership team. I have one more that I'll hold until the end, but then any more you want to add?
No, well, I'll add one more. Remember, there's a distinction between alignment and agreement.
Yeah.
And to really get to authentic alignment, there are going to be disagreements, as an example, on the how and the what, not on the why. And but when you make a decision as a team, then align with it. And don't go back out, as you mentioned, and say, well, we aligned on this, but I didn't agree with it.
Yeah.
No, we walk out aligned and we remain aligned, and we take responsibility for whatever the results are.
Yeah, that's great. And I'd say, and if a leader can't consistently do that, then they probably don't need to be a leader on that team.
Yeah.
That's the last one I'll add then, just because I love the title. Hey, good luck executing without strategic alignment, without leadership development and without a high-performing team, your strategic execution will be exponentially more difficult if you're lacking any one of those. It's going to hamstring everything.
That's great. Okay, Patrick,
Right.
take us home.
Yeah, well, okay, here's the good news. The next time we meet, we will have the full complement of our co-hosts back. We'll have Patsy Feeman, and maybe we'll make that at least a segment of our conversation is, hey, what leadership lessons from Europe? I don't know. We'll see. But thank you, listener, for sticking with us to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. Leb, thanks so much for your contributions. You are fantastic as always.
You're welcome, Patrick. And the next time someone tells you that you're brilliant, say, "Oh, thank you."
Okay, I will. Noted. Thank you. Yes, you can download this episode's Let's Get Practical along with all of our Let's Get Practicals at thefrustratedceo.com and connect with all of us on LinkedIn. We would love to hear from you. If you're liking the show, do us a favor and give us a 5-star review on whatever podcast platform you find us. And I think that's it. We'll see you next time on the Frustrated CEO podcast.